I'm thrilled to welcome to the stage Steve Ballmer, who'll be joining me for a fireside chat. Mr. Ballmer is a philanthropist, the former CEO of Microsoft, founder of USAFacts, and chairman of the Los Angeles Clippers. Last February, the Ballmer Group announced an $18 million gift to the HAVI and 3 other organizations to support our collaborative work to address the crisis of gun violence in our community. Thank you, Steve, for your generous support of our work and for joining the conference today. Steve, it was really great to meet you yesterday in person in LA. We've been on, Teams this past year, and I just want to share our time together has been really powerful because you are more, I think, than just someone who, as a philanthropist wants to contribute to things that are meaningful, but I think that you lend your brain and your brilliance that's really helped us deepen our strategy and enrich our vision. So it means a great deal that you're here. And I want to welcome you to our conference. We have over 600 people registered, so you can't see them, but they're all out there. And they range from frontline violence intervention workers, trauma surgeons, lawmakers, journalists, and more. So let's have a conversation.
Well, thanks for all your nice words, and thanks for having me. My pleasure to be here, Fatimah.
Thank you. All right. So, I wanted to just first connect to you, right? I mean, I've read your bio, but a lot of people certainly know about Microsoft, right? You've created technology that's changed the world. But many people don't know you, Steve. So tell us a little bit about you, your background, and how is it that you made your way to this issue and other social issues?
Oh, well, I grew up in Detroit. My dad was an immigrant from Switzerland. My grandpa on my other side, who I also knew, was an immigrant from, I'll say, the Tsar's Russia, if you will. Not a good place to be Jewish, particularly at the time he grew up, at the time of the pogroms. Yeah. And I won't say I grew up with hardship. My dad managed to get on a good path and had a decent, lower middle class job by the time I was born. And even though he had not gone to college or the like, but I had a nice, good upbringing. I think the first time issues of violence probably came on my radar was 1967 during the Detroit riots. It was a meaningful thing. My grandfather lived right down in the neighborhood. My mom had been born in the neighborhood where the riots started. And so it was a particular interest to me. I'm not saying it changed my life at the time, but it was certainly a formative experience for me. Went away to college. I was a mathy guy, if you will. Did a small stint in marketing. Went to Microsoft, where I did get a chance to participate in what I would consider my biggest contribution to the world, at least so far, and that's the democratization of computing, which I think has been an important thing for the world, and giving people the tools to help them grow up and be productive and do more than they otherwise would have done. I retired from Microsoft. This is probably longer than you want, but I retired from Microsoft, and my wife said, "Okay, dude, this was 2014. You're getting involved in our philanthropy." And I said, "Well, I'm kind of tired. Maybe how about a little time off, and let's just pay our taxes, because government takes care of these things."
Right.
And what I've learned full go around is government does have to pay for most of this. And yet there's a role for philanthropy to help fill in around the edges, things government won't pay for. Our focus, my wife started in foster care. We broaden that to focus in on this notion. I like to call it the American dream. Some people don't like to use that word anymore, but it's the notion that anybody can have an equivalent opportunity of thinking about what they want to do and what it might mean to them economically. And that kind of opportunity and possibility doesn't hit people fairly in the United States. If you were born poor, you are likely to stay poor. If you are born poor and an African-American man, particularly, your chances are the worst of any gender, racial, ethnic group. Again, not fair. And then we've been out as part of our work talking to people and in various parts of the world about ways to make a difference. And our team said, hey, look, this community violence intervention stuff is important. That resonated with me because it was so logical. I did not grow up in a tough area or as I said, I had a little bit of kind of thought in the back of my head, but how logical can it be, even if I didn't grow up in a neighborhood with violence, that it would traumatize a neighborhood. It's not just the people who shoot and are shot that are important in that equation. It just resonated with me. And if you can't grow up with some kind of stability and safety as a child, I think the chance to be a high functioning adult who really has a chance to realize the American dream goes less. And that's how we came to know you.
Yes, that's incredibly helpful. And you are in many ways describing structural racism, which is for us like the foundation is understanding, beginning with an analysis that these are communities of promise that have incredible potential that's been, I think, prevented, impeded by all of these barriers. And if we can only, remove those barriers, provide adequate resource, we can see transformation. That we see that across the country. Sounds like your interest in this area is connecting those dots, recognizing, that your family was afforded those sorts of economic opportunities at a time that allowed, you to get to college, and we want to have those sorts of access points for folks who are been historically marginalized in this country. So I appreciate you starting there. Steve, I've heard you, also talk about, as a owner of a NBA team, the players. And so I just love to hear more about, how you've interacted with players and their stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think properly view, I am a chairman of our team, by the way. I'm not an owner. I think that word is a little tougher to use, and so I prefer chairman. I'm not giving you a hard time, but it's
no, got it. I'm new to the game, so
no, you're not new to the game. I would say the world at large will always refer to me as an owner, and I think that has overtones, again, from some of the legacy issues of racism that at least I'd like to be called chairman. Let me just put it that way.
I love it.
But many people who play in the NBA didn't come from the same kind of backgrounds I did. Some did, some didn't. It is a mix, and it's a mix across white players, African-American players, foreign players, if you will. But certainly, as you hear the life stories of some of our guys, it is different than my life story, and it just brings things closer to home. Even I would say, in Seattle, hearing the life stories of some of the folks, kids that my kids would play basketball with, it's a different life story than my own, and I think it just personalizes a little bit. It doesn't put me in the environment, but it personalizes a little bit, some of the issues and trauma associated with folks getting shot / murdered.
Yes, thank you. I've heard you share. We were together at the Cities United conference, and I heard you share a story about your time in LA, doing kind of a walk in Watts. And I just would love to hear that here, because I think it so captures some of the reality for our patients, our clients on the ground in neighborhoods that have been impacted by violence every single day.
Yeah, this was early on in the time that we opened an office. We focus philanthropically. We do national stuff, but we're deep in Detroit, my hometown, Seattle, where we live, and LA, where our basketball team is. And we were just in the process, I think, of opening up an office down here. And the lady in charge said, "Hey, let's go to Watts." She had run a not-for-profit that was essentially based in Watts. And she said, "I'll take you on a little tour." Great. Especially for me, the Watts riots were just before the Detroit riots. So that name had been in my head for a long time. And we take a trip and we pass an elementary school and we see these nice rolling mounds. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's nice. When my kids grew up, there was a show on TV called Barney, I think, and it had these nice rolling mounds for what they called the Teletubbies.
Right.
With the Teletubby show, I can't remember. Now, I don't know, people on the call may be too young or too old to remember that, but it's in my head. It was this beautiful rolling hills. And I said to the woman, "Hey, that's great. Isn't that nice to have those nice little Teletubby hills?" And she said, no, those are mounds that were built so that kids, if they're out on recess or gym class, can dive down and get behind the earthen mound in case there are bullets flying and stay safe. And I was, whoa, not what I expected for an observation. And it just drove home some of the themes that we're talking about. And safe neighborhoods, it's just, people say it's important and it resonates. The thing that got me at least partly interested in community violence is I think it's going to take a few different things, many different things, to keep neighborhoods safe. And in general, some of those things are elimination of the systemic barriers that have been put in front of people, African Americans. Some of those will come from folks like us and others who are outside the community and can make a difference. But some of that also has to come from inside of communities.
That's right.
And so this notion of CVI hit me because it is a three-vectored problem. Can't all be solved by people who are not inside these communities changing systems. It's got to happen in a variety of different ways. And the CVI stuff, it's like, okay, this is great. Communities are going to do the part they can.
That's right.
Police will do the part they can. The elimination of other barriers like housing, et cetera, and poverty that have grown up around the African American community. There needs to be assistance from outside the community. So I was really excited. I know I went off. I took off from your comment, Fatimah, but I thought I'd go there.
No, that's exactly right. And, I want to kind of continue on this point. You're a data guy. It's no secret you're a data guy. You really see opportunities for data to transform our understanding of problems. And, as you were kind of getting acquainted with this work, I was curious, what compelled you, right? Was there data, was there evidence that said, okay, were you able to connect those dots? And related to that, give us some advice, right? What data and evidence do we need most to help scale this work across the country, right? We're still new as a field, and we got a long way to go. We've captured that momentum, but would love your advice here.
Yeah, I would say there's two things. One that helped me and one that helped me very differently. There was data from Oakland specifically that showed, I think it was a 50% drop in shootings over the course of a relatively small number of years. I won't remember the precise data. That's great. Now, if you want to do random controlled trials and you were totally thinking data needs to guide you, that might not be enough, or it might be enough. The other thing that helped me is this notion that things made sense. And it's not like there were other alternatives on the table for how communities could help themselves get safer. Where are the other ideas? And I used to say at Microsoft that if you wait for the world to tell you what to do, you're not going to succeed. You can't not listen to the world tell you what to do.
Right.
but you also have to be willing to bet on innovative approaches. So from my perspective, you probably, if you wanted to have a stack of data, trying to get it in the picture, that is super high, you might not have it yet. Therefore, you got to start. You got to have faith because it's the best idea out there. Let's get after it. Let's invest in organizations and like yours and the people in the cities doing the work. Right. I like the program that we're working with you guys on to reduce. I could say 30% in 5 years, but I prefer to say 50% in 8 years because it's a bigger, bolder goal, if you will. And if you can make that happen in 12 cities that are diverse, different parts of the country, different sizes, different mayoral structures, then you have a base of evidence. But I'm not going to wait for that. I don't think that makes sense, given how much we care, given that there aren't a lot of other ideas out there, and given that, in a sense, even philanthropically, we can put up some, quote, risk capital. If it works perfectly, great. If it needs tuning, great. And if it doesn't work perfectly, which I pray not, I pray things work the way, at least directionally we hope, then we've got to, we're okay to take that too.
That's exactly right. And, it's going to take, I think, faith that the innovation that we're seeing across the country can be consolidated into something very powerful, moving from great ideas to a strategy to a structured ecosystem. And we've seen that progression in cities that have been experimenting. Oakland, of course, has been experimenting with these kinds of programs for a long time, right? Early in the 90s. And so they're benefiting from, I think, a history of that investment and experimentation. So we've got a real opportunity. I know, Steve, you've got a real passion for workforce development and growth, particularly in communities of color. And at the HAVI and at many of our partners, we've been working really hard to professionalize our violence intervention workers. These are the credible messengers who work to really transform the lives of our patients and our clients. And I think you heard a little bit of our previous panel in which we talked about how to empower and support our frontline workers. I'm curious if you have any advice about how we continue to do this, right? As we scale, as we continue to professionalize, what are the, important bright spots and opportunities? What are the things we need to consider as we grow and grow this work?
Yeah, let me first give a little bit of context. I come from the for-profit sector. We're getting things to be systematized, repeatable, people trained for repeatability. That doesn't mean sometimes you don't need empathy. Try getting on a phone with a customer who's mad about their, PC not working. If so it's less life and death, but it's not as if business is without some level of empathy, and then be able to execute consistently at scale well. I'm not going to argue that government is perfect. I'm not going to argue that the military is perfect or the police or anybody else, but they invest in that kind of methodology. When we have the great hope or great desire, for example, to improve the quality of policing in the country, the only reason I have any hope that can happen is because the police has procedure and method and training. They may need to do better in all those things and screening who goes in, but you can dream of it because you know there's a focusing on it. In the community, and I would say the same is true in the military, not in all parts of government, but at least I'll highlight a couple, where you've got all that method. How do you get that method in professional training so you get reliable and consistent in the community violence intervention space? Well, professionalizing the field is one, but if you want to professionalize the field, you also have to be able to describe what does it mean to be professional. And some of that is training, of course, And some of it is giving people the tools. What do we want people to do when you're in when you've identified somebody who's at risk of being shot or shooting? How do you manage? How does the person who knows that pass the information along? So it's not all, hey, let's train people up. Right. Let's make this a real, the word business isn't appropriate, but let's make it a real systematic activity, which means we have to help people, teach them to grow, and we've got to give them tools that help them do their jobs very well. And again, it's an attraction to me of the work that you're doing with NICJR, with Cities United, with the collective, putting all that stuff together. And will there be local variation? Of course, there'll be local variation. And yet at the end of the day, and I believe this throughout the not-for-profit sector that we deal with, everybody says they're terminally unique. And the truth is they're unique, but there's a lot of commonality across these things, across city, geography, and we got to get the commonality baked in so then the attention can go into the small differences as opposed to everybody reinventing the wheel. So long answer to a short question, but that's what I think.
Yes, and I think it'll be interesting to hear throughout the conference people's responses to this, because I think that we've played in the sandbox quite a bit, right? And you think about let's think about innovation and what's the seat of innovation is spaciousness and creativity. And there's a real tension between that, which I think has been how we've developed such incredible practices across the country, and this moment we're in where the opportunity and the government resource, the philanthropic resource to scale is there. People are going to continue to want to understand, what's the protocol? Who do I hire? What are my expectations of those folks who we've hired, and how do we support them? So this is the other side of it, which is, we're talking about a workforce. This is very different than you mentioned the military and the police, where, their retirement benefits and all sorts of hazard pay and overtime and is well known and well structured. We don't have that here. And, those go hand in hand to building that infrastructure. What's it going to take for us to get there, I think is some of the things you mentioned. We've got to really demonstrate and clarify. We also have to continue to fight for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry I used almost the examples of the military and the police because they sound violent. What they are is systematic, yeah. And I'm not trying to hold them out as examples of everything, but there may be easier. Even education's hard for me to hold out as an example because teachers have a lot of flexibility about what they do with curriculum. It's a little less structured, and this is a tough one. I get a lot of negative feedback, I would say, in the not-for-profit community. People will say, hey, we're dealing with people here. We're not dealing with products and revenue, which I accept, but it's not an excuse for no level of, consistency and good tools. And a guy who worked for me at Microsoft said something which I viewed as prescient, because engineers say, we're all individual, we're all creative, and don't put any restrictions on us. To which one of the guys came back and said, look, we want you to be creative, but we're going to give you the lines, and please color within the lines. It's kind of like you say to a kid, we want you to be creative, and yet those little pictures that you color do have lines, and the kids kind of like the fact that they have some boundaries, and then they like the fact they can be creative inside the boundaries and the approach. And I think the work you guys are doing is to try to put an approach out there, and then people can be creative in the way they deal with others and show empathy and be brave. When I hear a story of an outreach worker literally standing between two people with guns, that's just not empathetic. That's brave. And I salute that. And I can't imagine doing that job, but that's not an easy job. That's not a job that should have the lowest compensation for sure. It's a tough job. And I hope by professionalizing the field in this sense, it's also easier to attract funding to get more people and to get them paid in an appropriate way.
That's right. I think the an analogy of healthcare, we've got surgeons who are highly trained, and we've got nurses who are highly trained, in the helping profession. And there's a level of, I think, the values that we've been saying all along, we've got to somehow seep into this structure. We're getting more structured. We have to. It's an imperative for us. But we got to carry the values that got us here along with us, and it's that both and we're going to continue to build the culture for this work to stay as accountable and as in integrity with the heart work as it is with the structural work. So I really appreciate that. Steve,
I will say, for just a quickie for me,
please.
The culture and the heart of what people are putting into this is what's inspiring.
Yes.
And so what I think what you guys are trying to do is just help people, get max value out of this incredible heart, which, anyway, to me, it really is inspiring.
Yes. I'm inspired every single day by folks time and time again who not only are doing everything they can to help clients transform their lives and their families and the communities, late nights, early mornings, drive them here, get them, anything they can do. It's truly remarkable. And the insights, what we're learning about how to continue to do this work is powerful. Steve, I want to end with this. We've talked quite a bit about narrative, and we have a few journalists in our conference who I believe are tuned in. I'm curious about how you've seen the narrative shift on this, and what more needs to be done. What do we need to be saying about this work to help us continue to move forward?
Number one, I think it's hard to describe, particularly to people who come in with no experience to appreciate what you're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd say most people say, if you got a crime problem, the violence problem, the answer is all in the police. Mm-hmm. And so the ability to describe who's really doing what, how that is different from what, and I'm going to describe in communities where I live. I'm not going to try to describe in the communities where this work is happening, because that narrative I have no expertise to apply. But being able to explain that, to be able to explain how the work is done. There's plenty of TV shows that'll tell you there's a beat cop and there's a detective and blah, blah, blah. There's no TV show that's reinforcing. And I'm not saying there should be, but it's a way to think about how narratives get built. So being, first of all, able to really describe it to people. Yeah. Most people now, at least in the press where I live, it's the mass shootings that garner attention for people getting shot. And while those are tragic, they're relatively small, much smaller percentage of shootings than the work we're talking about or the actions we're talking about here. I'm not saying we should diminish one to enhance the other, but I think it's important for the story to be told. I think it's important for people not to rush to a racial conclusion around this violence, and being able to explain a little bit. I mean, the truth is, there is more violence in the African American community, but there are more problems that people are doing. I mean, just statistically, there's more, but that doesn't mean that there's more propensity for people to be violent. That's, in my opinion, at least, that's nonsense. And I think the narrative that comes out of this work actually makes it easier. when somebody says, I forget which town it was we were talking about, but there's 220 people I can't remember, was that Atlanta? I can't remember. There's 220
DC.
people who are likely, sorry, which town was it?
Washington, D.C.
Washington,
People
D.C.
of promise list, that's right.
220 people who could be the troublemakers that make a whole community of hundreds of thousands of people unsafe. It's unfair for people to judge that the whole community is violent, but there are people who are more severely traumatized, and this is the outlet. I mean, there's plenty of other outlets. There's higher suicide rates, I think, in the white community, for example, than there is in the African American. It just manifests itself. The trauma manifests itself differently. I know, I mean, I've looked at the numbers on who's in prison for violent crime. Whites, Blacks, Latino, and it's all different. Whites are more likely to be, by the statistics, in prison for rape, African Americans for murder, and Latinos for aggravated assault. It's all the same underlying problems. People have trauma that they express in different ways, but it's a small number in every one of those communities. And the community shouldn't be damned because there are more severely traumatized people, and this is viewed as the outlet.
Steve, thank you. I'm listening to you, and I'm having this strong reaction. I'm thinking about, my father, who has been in and out of prison most of my life, have, older siblings who've been in and out of prison most of their life. It is even a single person who, based on that underlying trauma, doesn't have access to the transformative care they need to kind of live and experience their own potential. That's what we fight for every single day. Every single day, we are standing in and thinking through how we make things just a little bit easier for them to transform their lives. So I'm going to just thank you again for this conversation. Thank you for your passion and taking the time to actually understand what this work is, and again, contribute in the ways that you have. We are going to be partners for years to come in this work, and we continue to lean on your advice and assistance and your encouragement for other allies to join this fight. We're going to need many, many champions to make this work. So, Steve, thank you. Have a wonderful day. And to my attendees at the conference, please enjoy. We will now transition to our next breakout sessions. All right, Steve, take care.
Thanks so much, everybody. Keep up the good work. So valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fatimah.